Hey guys, it's Kirsten. I'm very excited to be joining you today. Why, you might ask? Because I'm talking about music again. I loved making the last video for you in which I talked about how to become a more musical dancer. So today I'm actually going to try to give you some tools to understand common rhythmic structures within ballet music. What I would like for you to get out of this video is to be able to listen to music throughout class and understand how to count it, how to understand the rhythms and dance to it better and pick up on the accents within the music. So at the very least, you could be listening to something like a tango. That's an example I use very often, and you know that you should be counting 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, or maybe something more basic that might take time. So something more basic would be understanding how to count a waltz rhythm, which is 1 and 2 and 3, and then also being able to understand that maybe your tendu from first is going to sound like 1 and 2 and 3. This is especially important if you teach ballet. You really need to understand the basics of music, because there are going to be a lot of auditory learners in your class, and you need to understand the music that you are composing combinations to. You need to understand how to count when you're showing those combinations so that they have appropriate accents that match the music. You need to be musical so that your students can learn how to also dance musically. I think every teacher should have a basic understanding of music. It is crucial. Enough said about that. So we're going to go on and start with how to break down a duple meter. In this video, I will also be covering triple meters and how to count in phrases of 6. Do be sure to save it in your video favorites or your watch later or something like that, and share it with your friends, especially if you teach. I think this is crucial knowledge for everybody, even though I am not saying I'm the expert that needs to teach the world about music. I just don't think there are enough sources on the internet about how to understand ballet music specifically. So I hope this helps, and please share if you enjoy it. So a duple meter is simply a rhythmic structure, or a time signature, I should say, where you count not just saying 1, 2, 3, but you break those counts into 2 parts. They could be broken into 2 parts. 4 parts. I meant to say 4 parts. If it's a 4/4 time signature, but you don't have to know what that is. That's often something musicians dive into, but you don't have to have that sort of understanding to be a ballet dancer, obviously. But as far as we're concerned, we count duple meters as 1 and 2 and so on, you know? As opposed to a triple meter, which is where a count, I'll get into this later more, but a count is broken into 3 parts, so it would be counted 1 and 2 and 3. So you have that extra So that's often how people verbalize those counts. So back to duple meter. It's going to have a very even sound to it. You'll be doing more accented movements often. If tendu uses a triple meter, it's going to have more time for articulations and plies and more of a smooth quality. But when you're doing movements to a duple meter, it's typically going to be accented, position oriented, not as much about the process, not as smooth and flowing. And usually things with fast tempos are going to be duple meters, though there are certainly slow duple meters, like your tendu from first might be a slow duple meter. Going into a faster tempo, you're going to have your tendus from fifth, your dégagés, in this 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and kind of tempo. So qualitatively, it's not going to have as much of a suspending sound to the music when you're counting it. To help with these examples, I will contrast this with a triple meter, where you're going to have a 1 and 2 and so there's kind of this suspending sound between the counts, or feeling between the counts, whereas a duple meter is going to be straightforward. It's 1 and 2 and 3, although I do want to make it clear that these rhythmic structures or time signatures, those aren't the same thing, by the way, but I'm trying to help you understand in any way I know how. So I just forgot what I was saying, but any tempo really can be applied to these time signatures. So I'm just going to be giving you common examples. So I've got my list here. A duple meter is usually used for combinations such as tendus, dégagés, frappés, petit battement, grand battements, in something like a march, like a big march, like a 1 and 2 and 3. Also combinations like pirouettes from fifth, where you have that accent down and down and down, rather than other pirouettes too that are more waltzy, had that suspended quality to them. That's going to be often done to a triple meter. But usually petit allegro and coda steps like piqué turns and whatnot, that's going to be a duple meter, 1 and 2 and 3. Although a coda is 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and so you're not going to be saying that and to yourself oftentimes. You're going to be saying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, something like that. And by the way, if you're teaching, it's good to indicate the ands or and-as between each count at the beginning of demonstrating a combination, but it's not necessary to keep counting that way as time goes on. People should get the point. So moving on to triple meters. As I said before, it is a count that is broken into 3 parts simply. That doesn't necessarily indicate the rhythm. There are many different rhythmic structures within a triple meter, same as duple meter. For instance, a triple meter often referred to as a 3, or a duple meter is often referred to as a 2. You might hear your teacher, if you are lucky to have a live pianist, and if your teacher has some sort of musical awareness, they might say a 2 please, or a 3 please, thank you, something like that, rather than a duple meter or a triple meter. These are interchangeable phrases. So anyway, not all triple meters have this rolling suspended quality where you do smooth movements to them, such as a waltz. I feel like a waltz combination is kind of like the epitome or the most common example of a triple meter in ballet. However, it could also be a mazurka where it's 1 and 2, 3, 2 and 2, 3 and 3 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 2, something like that. So it's got that accent 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and so it's got this, a lot of times the steps will have this and soft and accent and soft and accent, and that doesn't make much sense, but maybe this lilting quality to them with a bit more of a punch between the counts. But more commonly, a triple meter step will have more of a flowing lyrical quality to it. It won't always be so accented, and even if it is, it's got I keep saying suspension or suspended quality, or a flowing quality between the accents. The steps will usually be less position oriented and be more flowing, more about the transitions. So back to the list. Combos that usually use a triple meter are, of course, plies. So you need to understand that plies are counted 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And when you understand what's happening between the counts, you, especially in slower movements, you understand how much time you have between the counts. You're not just saying 1, 2, 3 and thinking, do I get there on 3 or do I get there on 4? Well, you could actually get there on 4 and then go into the next step. There's so many more options for extending your movements if you're understanding what's happening between the counts. There's more time to utilize, if that makes sense. So as I was saying, plies, sometimes tendus if they have more of a flowing articulate quality to them. Obviously adagio, that's very common. Fondus, I said that with such a weird voice. Okay. And one other note about tendus or dégagés to a triple meter, you're often going to be doing things like cloches, brushes, like I said, more plies, more articulations, maybe a few accents into a plie or something like that. Rond de jambes, of course, stretches, pirouettes, waltz combos. And as far as jumps go, C-sones often are done to a triple meter. So you can have that C-sone, stretch, plie, and C-sone, stretch, plie. There's more of a buoyancy and a suspended quality to them. Again, I just feel like that's the best adjective I have right now. As well as grand allegro, because grand allegros often have a waltz quality to them where you are accented, but you're in the air and down, and you're doing tombe, pas de bourrée, and up, and contretemps or something like that. So a lot of times things with that airtime feel are going to be to a triple meter. I do want to give a special mention to jazz rhythms because it can be confusing. I do know a lot of commonly used ballet CDs that are used by teachers, like very widely used CDs that use wonderful jazz rhythms, but when you're learning how to count, it makes it kind of hard because jazz rhythms are counted differently. I'm not the expert on jazz rhythms, but what I do know is that sometimes a duple meter can easily sound like a triple meter to an ear that's not well trained. So instead of being counted like 1 and 2 and, it's going to have an in there like a triple meter, but it's not counted 1 and it's and a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4. So it's got a strong downbeat to it, but you're typically going to start counting on a and a 1. And there's going to be an in there between the and the count, but it's off kilter. You know, the and is in the middle of the count if you're imagining it like a little chart. But that and is between, the is between the and the count. So it's and a 1 and a 2. So you could count and 1 and 2. But it is important as a teacher to keep that accent in your voice, or not just a teacher, as a dancer, to also understand how to count that. So an adjective that's often used within jazz rhythms is that it has a swing to it. So the movements are going to be accented. They are going to have a bit of a hold to them, but usually jazz rhythms incorporate movements that have an inward accent. And so I hope all of you understand, as for dancers, that you need to have the understanding of what is an accent in step or an accent out. So commonly that is talked about whenever you are executing tendus or dégagés or something like that. You can say and 1 and 2 and 3 or something like that. And you can be out in a tendu on the count of 1, or you could be in 5th position or 1st position, whatever it is, on the count of 1. So usually accent in is going to be a bit, it's going to be a quicker tendu, so you start on and so that you can close on 1. So it'll be and 1 and 2 and 3 rather than 1 and 2 and 3. So you're going out on the 1. So you need to have that basic understanding. But that's definitely not something musicians think of, or I don't think, That's a ballet dancer logistical thing that you need to tackle. So all that to say, jazz rhythms do have a strong accent, so I don't think they're too hard to count, but if you are trying to be accurate in your counting, just be aware that it's a little different. It's typically counted like and a 1 and a 2 and a 3. So it'll be used in things like tendus, dégagés, and petit allegro. Those are common things that might incorporate a jazz rhythm. With a certain CD or pianist who might fancy a good jazz tune, which I totally do. It's got good accent, a little bit of a jive to it, a good downbeat. They're really wonderful for ballet class. So if you know how to count them, absolutely use them. So I'm going to also break down some very important rhythms to know, some rhythmic structures. So you absolutely have to know a waltz, which is going to be counted 1 and 2 and 3. So it's going to be smooth and flowing. That's often, obviously going to include balances, waltz turns, usually in across the floor type pirouette combinations. Adagios are going to use a triple meter, though we wouldn't often call that a waltz. A tango is tricky because it also includes the sound whenever people count it, but it is in fact kind of like an off-kilter duple meter. So a tango, I'm sure you've all been familiar with them, you've heard them, they're very fun to dance to. It's my personal favorite. It's counted 1. So I'm thinking of the song from Carmen, da 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 da. So that's a tango. It's counted 1 and a 2 and 3 and a 4 and. So it's actually a duple meter, but you need to be aware of how to count it so that you could utilize that extra bit of Again, using the word suspension, a little bit of like extra extension in your movements, and then you sharply close. Like this will often be used in a fondue combination rather than just a typical slow moving, even fondue that has a very lyrical quality. I love having my students do fondues to a tango because it teaches them accents, how to be a more syncopated, dynamic type dancer. So you might do 1 and a 2 and 3 and a 4 and, so that's like hand dancing for coupe, fondue, close fifth, coupe, or fondue, coupe, extend, close fifth. So there might be that sharp coming in to go out and hold in, to go out and hold, something like that. It's often used in pirouettes as well, as I mentioned, so you could do tombe, pas de bourrée, and a pirouette, close fifth, and tombe, pas de bourrée, pirouette, and close fifth, and something like that. So it's just got more accent to it rather than a regular waltz type rhythm for pirouettes. A mazurka is another triple meter you absolutely have to know. It's definitely used in most of the classic ballets. So, and it actually has a step that goes along with it, the mazurka step, of course. So that's counted 1 and 2, 3, 2 and 2 and 3 and 2 and 2. I lost my counts there for some reason because I started thinking of the classic. Is that Giselle? That tune. Something like that. I might be totally wrong. I don't know. Kind of losing it. I've been talking for a while. So again, 1 and 2, 3 and 2 and 2 and 3 and 3 and 2 and 3 and, so that's actually a triple meter, but it's got more accent to it. Because if you break it down, it could also be counted 1 and 2 and, but you're kind of throwing some accent into the and. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 2 and 2 and 3 and. One thing that I've accidentally left out here, I'm saying accent a lot, but sometimes I actually mean syncopation, which is important to understand. It is the shifting of the normal accent within the music, usually by stressing the normally unaccented beats. Okay, that's it. Thanks. Now we're getting into the sixes. So I find that teachers usually fail miserably at counting sixes, and I don't want to seem all uppity and like I'm the pro here, but if you're gonna ask a pianist to count in a 6 or to play in a 6, know how to gosh dang count in a 6, okay? Please, thank you. That's it. Sorry, rant over. I swear I'm not that judgmental of a person. That just drives me crazy, because then there's inevitably some like massive issue with communication and everyone's confused. So it is easier, instead of just counting to 6, to think of the rhythm. Usually 2 common rhythms that are used in phrases of 6 are a polonaise and a bolero, but I believe a polka is also in a 6, and a jig, I think. Might be wrong there. So there are many different ways that a 6 or a phrase of 6 can have a rhythm, but it might sound like 1 and a 2 and 3 and 4 and a 5 and 6. I think that's a bolero. So 1 and a 2 and 3 and 4 and a 5 and 6. Something like a polonaise, I believe, is, let me think for a second. Let's see. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm running late here. I gotta go teach. But different ways to count a 6 are 1 and a 2 and 3 and 4 and a 5 and 6. 1 and 2, 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 2 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. So combinations that use a 6 might be a petit allegro, grand battements. Boleros are sometimes used for grand battements. So that's 1 and a 2 and 3 and 4 and a 5 and 6. In repertoire, it is usually used for some sort of like a processional entrance that might use an actual polonaise step. For example, the procession in the beginning of the 3rd act of Sleeping Beauty uses a polonaise, I believe. So I'm sorry guys, I have to go. Time management issues. I wish I could talk about this forever. I didn't end up using musical examples, which actually works out for me because then I won't have monetization copyright issues, but do feel free to be curious and look up examples of what I'm talking about online. They're all over the web. Experiment with being more of an active listener to ballet CDs so that you can have practice and an understanding of how to count, especially if you're a teacher who needs to effectively demonstrate steps. This is super important. I really hope that this was helpful for you. Please feel free to subscribe and turn on the notifications button if you'd like to see more of my videos on a regular basis. Like this, share it as I mentioned, I'd really appreciate that. And if you are feeling so inclined that you would like to financially support my channel, you can do so at patreon.com. I have all the links for everything below. Love you guys, so glad you stuck around to the end of the video. Thank you if you did, and I'll see you next time. Bye!